Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming. My name is Melanie Mead. I'm the Education Director here at the South Fork Natural History Museum, or SoFo as we're known. Today's speaker is Mr. John Himmelman, author and illustrator of children's books and nature books. And he's going to be telling us about his latest book, Discovering Moths, Nighttime Jewels in Our Backyard. I would like to mention, though, that after tonight's lecture, we do have a mothing excursion that SoFo will be doing on Friday, July the 25th. Anyone would be able to join us. And our next East End Environmental Lecture will be October the 18th with Aidan Perkins, who will be speaking about tropical fish on that.
Oh, yeah. I'm John Himmelman, and we're here to hear about moths. I hope that's why you're here. So this is sponsored by the Dark Night Society, and I'm going to be showing pictures of lights, so I don't want to scare anybody. But I'm going to be talking about moths here in New England. Most of them were shot in my backyard. I live in Killer Road, Connecticut, and I just want to show some of the creatures that are affected by too much light, and I'm going to get into that in more detail. So I did a book on moths, called Discovering Moths, Nighttime Jewels in Your Own Backyard. I actually did one 22 years ago, and then I got to do it over again 20 years later, and this is a reprint. There were a lot of things to change. Half of the names have been changed in 20 years, and 20 years from now, they're probably going to be changed again. And the first book I did in slide, or all my pictures was slides, and the publisher flipped a bunch of them, so they got mislabeled, so I got to fix that. So I'm really thrilled. But it got me all excited about these creatures again. I'll start with a little story about something that happened in my backyard last summer. And just to give you an idea of where I'm coming from, so I had put I'm going to talk about moths and lights a little bit there. So I got a new light, and it's a UV light, and I decided I'm going to try it at a different place to set it up, because moths are attracted to lights. I've been monitoring the moths in my backyard for 35 years or so, and this is right on my front porch, and I find other light is way in the back of the yard, and it's a long walk, and I make several trips throughout the night to see what showed up. I think, it'd be nice if just saying something on the front porch. I could just walk out, see what's there, go back in the house, and whatever I'm doing. So I set it up that first night, and not too much showed up. And then something did show up, and it was kind of heavy, and it flew towards the light out of the darkness, because you can't really see where it's coming from. And I looking at it, this is something different. This is a headier moth. This is a heady body moth, and that meant something special to a mother. It could be one of those silk moths, like Wuna moths in that family. And then it flew away again. It didn't come, and it came back again, and it flew around. Oh, like really fast. This can't be what I think it is, and it flew away again. And I'm never gonna see it again. This is gonna be a mystery. I went out again about a half an hour later, and it flew in again, and I said some bad words, but in a good way, like it excite. Holy bleep, you bleep, bleep, and how my wife is sleeping right upstairs above there. Okay, I gotta keep it down. And then I think I knew what it was, and it flew away again. And then it came back again about 10 minutes later. It flew around, and it was what I thought, and I was just freaking out, and because I hadn't seen this one before, and I have been looking in my yard, like I said, that in Killingworth for about 30 years in my yard. And it flew around, and it came to the light, and it went into the chorus behind there, and it got sort of tangled up, and my hands were literally shaking. I wanted to catch it so I could take a picture of it. And I'm going, don't blow it. And I'm trying to catch this thing, and I'm just afraid of it. And I was told that, like when hunters, when they see the deer, their hands start to shake because you're holding back your adrenaline. And I just didn't want to mess it up. And I caught it, and it was what I thought it was. It was an Io moth, this beautiful big Saturnalia Io moth that I'd never seen before in my life alive. I've seen them dead. And this is Io, named for the closest moon to Jupiter. And it blew me away. And this is the kind of stuff that I seek out. This is what I look for, is that excitement of seeing something brand new. And I could see something brand new in my own backyard every single night. And usually the little tiny things, very rarely do these big bowls, kind of Saturday moths. So, but people have been watching moths for many thousands of years, probably way back at the Stone Age times when they were flying into the fires, and they probably would sizzle and they'd probably eat them. It's probably the birth of the midnight snack. And we actually do have a very long association with them. Silk moth, if you've ever had anything made of silk and made from the silk moth, is the caterpillar that produces the silk and is the only moth that lives in captivity, only in captivity. They don't exist in the wild. The females, this is the female. Oh, this is the female. The females don't fly. They actually have to break. It's like some of the chickens, like domestic chickens don't fly. Domestic ducks don't always fly because it doesn't make sense to have them be able to fly away if you're breeding them. And the male gets brought in, I just like on silk pillows with the female, and then they bring them away again. And this has been going on for about 5,000 years. We've been producing stuff. It's called sericulture. And this happened in China. They kept that secret for 3,000 years. The Silk Road came from China. And which amazes me how any country could keep a secret for especially something like that, for 3,000 years. And then Japan caught on, and then eventually Europe caught on, and then the secret was out. So we have had a long history with them. So there's kind of a tie here, and this is a house. This is Medford Street, 27 Myrtle Street, Medford, Massachusetts, and that's the modern pictures from Google Earth, and the other picture is just an older picture, probably around the 1800s. And there's something very significant about that house. And it was the person who lived there, Etienne Leopold Trouvelot. He was a portraitist from France. He left France to escape the French Revolution, and he had a hobby of sericulture, and he moved into this house. And sericulture wanted to find a way to produce silk, put out these big, conky silk moths. And he was experimenting with a whole bunch of different kinds of moths, and none of them were working very well. Either they died from a virus, or they just don't make much silk, or whatever. So he went back to France, and in 1869, he returned with what he had hoped was the solution. You get this here? The gypsy moth, which are now the remake of spongy moths. And so he knew that they were a problem. I'm going to go back to that in a second. He knew, how that happened. I'm not used to this clicker. Yep. High fly show and yeah, I got to have my glasses to see that. So he knew they were a problem. They called the manager this part, Linnaeus named them, and they were named for their wanderlust. They knew that they got away, and they were voracious hues. So he was careful. And there's two stories. Either he had them set up on his tree in his yard and they escaped, or he had a piece of paper. You would have the eggs like laid out on a piece of paper on his windowsill, and maybe a bruise came and took off of the eggs, and then they spread from there. Either way, they did escape. And he knew this would be a problem. And he went to Boston, actually Cambridge, where a lot of the entomologists were at the time. And he explained to them what happened, and they didn't seem that concerned. So he went back home, and he noticed that there's a problem. So what he did next is, I can't help but notice, in that tree, in that picture I showed, look how bare it is. I can't help but wonder what did that to the tree. So in 1882, he left his home in Massachusetts, and he got out of there before it got too bad. And he actually became an astronomer. There's a crater on the moon named for it, and there's a crater on Mars named for him, and there's no invasive species that I know of that live there. So he did all right. So in 1890, William Taylor moved into that house, and he went in. He went out for a walk one night, and he started hearing the drops. The droppings. Though it sounds like rain, and he knew that was a problem. So he went to Cambridge and he told the entomologists, and they said, "Yeah, we got to do something about this because it really started to spread." And they voted to spend $25,000 for the eradication of the gypsy moth, which is the first time any American government spent money for the eradication of an insect. And we know how well that went. So in my yard in Connecticut, we had a really bad outbreak maybe 8 years ago, somewhere around that. It was just awful. It was awful. And all of our trees were denuded. Also our oaks. You can still drive around and you see these dead oaks, just bare dead oaks all over the place. So around, just to give you their life cycles, this is the pupa of the gypsy moth. You might have seen these before. This is the female. The females don't fly. As soon as they come out, they send out their pheromones, and the male just flies like a bat out of hell looking for the female to pick up that scent. To see them flying day and night. And they mate. She lays eggs, and this is why they call them the spongy one. And it's sort of this soft, little silky kind of an egg mass with hundreds of little eggs in there. So, around 1920, the agricultural experiment station released a whole bunch of these little flies. And these are parasitizing flies, and they lay the eggs on the caterpillars, and then the caterpillars don't quite make it. It didn't work that well because what happened was the caterpillars only have one cycle a year, whereas the flies, they reproduce several times a year. So after the caterpillars of the gypsy moths are gone, they start laying their eggs on things like the Luna moths and a lot of these big, beautiful cydibeas, and their numbers started to crash. They've come back. Most of them have come back because I think this fly didn't do as well. So that really wasn't a good solution. Right around that same time, they released a fungus from Asia, and it's the Entomophaga mamega, and it hung around for just a few years and then it disappeared. So that wasn't a very good solution. But right around the late 80s or so, it came back. And some entomologists discovered that, and they reproduced it, and they spread it out again, and that's working. It's actually making a difference. If you ever see the caterpillars bent over like that, that means they had that fungus. Here's a whole tree filled with dead, this is in my yard, the dead gypsy moth caterpillars. So then worse, what you need is a wet spring, because it's fungus. It's a fungus that they release, and the fungus needs moisture. And when that fungus starts growing, what happens is when the caterpillars go up and down the trees, they pick up the fungus and then just kind of melts them. So this is, I bring this up because this is when people hear the word moth, they think of the problems, and these are kind of a big problem, but these were introduced, and usually species that are introduced tend to be a little bit of trouble for us. Moths and fungus don't always get along. This is a copper underwing, and these are moths that tend to go underneath cushions, like in your lawn chairs and stuff. There are little nooks and crannies where it stays moist, and there's a particular fungus, a cordyceps fungus, that will infect these moths and other moths. And this is the same moth a little bit later. It completely changes the form. It looks like some sculpture. Looks like some alien movie, actually. And it melts the moth, and it just becomes it goes from moth to mushroom. It starts off as an insect, and it becomes a fungus. So you'll sometimes run into these. Ever see these? Yeah. The Eastern tent caterpillar. Oh, everyone thinks they're gypsy moths, and they'll go out with their blowtorch, and they'll burn them down. But they're not. Yes, they will. They feed on some cherry trees, but they're a native species that feeds on native species. That's normal. That's what you want. So they're really harmless. Trees recover from them. And they're supposed to be there. They're part of the habitat. There's a forest tent caterpillar, its cousin, don't make those nests, and you'll sometimes see them crawling along the ground. There's the forest tent caterpillar. And here's the forest tent caterpillar next to the eastern tent caterpillar. The eastern is on the left, forest is on the right. They're negatives of each other. If you look, one's brown with pale stripes, one's pale with a dark brown stripe, and you'll just find them. They come out at the same time. They like to hang around each other. They're buddies. And on years where we have a lot of these moths, the cuckoos have a piece. Cuckoos are one of the few birds that can eat the really airy caterpillars. And I've once watched as a yellow cuckoo. They'll sit outside of the nest and they wait as they come one at a time, and they just pick them off one at a time and have a feast. These are the full webworms. This is another native species that everyone, gypsy moths. No, just because they're fuzzy and they don't know what they are. Most people don't know what one caterpillar from another. But there's a native species that feeds on native species. And if I go into a woodland and I see no eaten leaves, I think there's a problem. There's supposed to be holes in the leaves. There's supposed to be things eating those leaves. It's part of the whole cycle. So, what is a moth? You know what a butterfly is. So, butterflies and moths are of the same family of Lepidoptera, which means scaly wing. If you've ever picked up a moth or a butterfly, you get the little powdery stuff on your fingertips. Those are the scales that come off. And I was told when I was a kid, don't do that. They won't be able to fly, but they can. They're fine. But there are a lot of butterflies that can be mistaken for moths, and a lot of moths that can be mistaken for butterflies. There's about this geometer. This is just could be a butterfly. And this is a skipper butterfly that could kind of be a moth. So there's really an easy way to tell the difference between the two. So like I said, Lepidoptera means scaly wing. So moths that have furry scales. The moths were here on this planet first, and then on the evolutionary tree, the butterflies kind of sprouted to fill the daytime niche. So they are fairly closely related. Butterflies tend to have thinner bodies. Moths, because they are furrier, they're great for pollination. Moths tend to flutter to the landing. Butterflies tend to step the landing like a gymnast. So you can tell upon their flights. Most moths are nocturnal, but I'm going to bring up some that aren't. Where I don't know any butterflies that are nocturnal. They're all diurnal. There's got to be some make it the rainforest. And most moths will spin a cocoon. Some make sort of the naked pupa in the ground, or as butterflies, they make a chrysalis. Their outer skin kind of hardens and they attach to a plant or something like that. And moths, they'll hold their wings together, their forewings and their hind wings, but something like Velcro, called it frenulum. And butterflies that just flapping loose and flapping free. So here's a skipper. This is a skipper butterfly. It's a kind of butterfly, but you can note if you look at the antenna, there's a club that's up. That makes it a skipper butterfly. Or any other butterfly, the antenna ends with a club. It gets a little bit thicker in the very end. Whereas moths, it just tapers to nine. That is the way to tell the difference, morphologically. And some moths will have had sort of like feathery antennae, and those are like satellite dishes. The males usually have wider antennae because they use them as they're flying around to find the pheromones from the female, and then it kind of homes in on where that's coming from. They both go through a complete metamorphosis, starting off as eggs. So I found these eggs in my backyard, and they had holes in them. I think, the caterpillars got to be somewhere because they were kind of fresh. And I'm looking around, and I found some of the caterpillars. So they go through 5 stages of molting called instars, butterflies and moths. So they started out as kind of communal on that sassafras plant. So I missed the first stage. So they'd already developed bloods. This is the second instar of this particular moth. This is the same moth. So I watched them. So they started getting bigger, and they started moving away to go solo because they don't want to attract too much attention to them. So, just look at the change there, and then it changes again. So that's the third instar. We go into the fourth instar, same species, changed again. And we go to the fifth instar, a little bit different, not as different. And then finally, this particular one spins a cocoon and wraps a leaf around itself and spins a cocoon. And in the winter, it's the easiest way to find these cocoons because the leaves are down and the cocoons are hanging from the trees. They get bleached in the sun and they kind of get white, like a silvery white. And I could find them driving down the road. They kind of stick out after you get an eye for them. And these turned into Promethean moths. So anyone ever seen these? Now, these are one of the soap moths. I'm going to talk about that a bit more. And this is everybody's talking about the naked pupa. Some of them, like the sphinx moths, they don't spin anything. Their skin just gets hard and they just go in the ground. And this is a sphinx moth, and it's got a little, you could see it. Basically, from the shadow is proboscis. It gets its own little sheet. They're kind of like beer nuts, except this is a big fat beer nut. A lot of plants will save their release of their fragrance for meth. So they're pollinated by the moths. This is just a list of them. I planted them off garden in my yard a number of years ago. And a lot of them like the Cochiana, something in the tobacco family. But a lot of the flowers are also pollinated by them day and night. They'll be pollinated by the bees and the butterflies during the day, and the beetles, and at night they get pollinated by the moths. But again, these are the kind of ones that most people think of, like if you ever open up your cabinets, like you have cereal and grains, you get the flower moths flying out. These were introduced. They're not supposed to be here. So they're troublesome. Or clothes moths in Ireland, they call them hounds of fur. And these have been with us for as long as people have been wearing animal clothing over us. We have always had clothes moths since we evolved in Earth as humans. Japan has a whole other problem to deal with that we don't have to deal with. So this is what got me started. When I was a kid, I grew up I started out in Oceanside, New York, Long Island, and we had this one white pine, and I noticed that some of the needles were kind of in a tube. Something had made it into a tube, and I was curious. I looked inside, and there was like a little worm inside, a caterpillar. So I picked a whole bunch of them, and I put them in this old Maxwell House coffee can, and I forgot about it. I was a kid. And the next season, my father's cleaning out the garage, and he gets this, John, I think this is one of yours. And I opened it up, and there was a dead moth inside. And there was the skin of a pupa. And that whole thing there was all like falling apart. And I remember I had learned about metamorphosis in school. And there I was, metamorphosis. Look, it turned from that to that to that. And that just lit a fire to me. I just wanted to find more and more of these creatures. This is what they turned into, a little torturous. So, I showed you some of the band players, but that's less than 1% of all the species in the world are considered problems. All the rest are beneficial. And we had things like the Lenoplegardas, these beautiful pink and yellow moths. This is the rosy maple moth. Does anyone see these? These are so common. No? These are the ones that also got me as an adult. This one sent me to the library to go look up what it was. This was before the internet. They would come to my porcelain, and I had to know what they were. This is called the angel. This is some of these elegant creatures. This is the scribbler. This is one of the first ones to come out in March when the woods are dark and gray. There's really nothing going on in there. Rainy and dreary. This little fresh green sprite comes out that looks like just a piece of moss or something. And it's like one of the first little bits of color in my yard. The scribbler. And the raspberry pyrosta, little tiny things. That pyrosta means tiny dragon. I'm going to get into some of the names too, because I love the names of some of these. These will fly. You see this little pink thing going, and then when it reaches the lake, it goes upside down and gloms under the. I don't know how that works, but they're just amazing flights. The pale-shaded fern moth. These are abundant, and they're all over the place. You just have to look for them. The Ferguson scallop shell, sort of like a classy-looking creature. I don't see too many of those. The herald. This is a regal looking thing I've only seen once, and I said something really loud, but I started, oh my God, I can't believe I see this. That we have things called arrows, little geometrics that inchworms, but they turn into these nice green little creatures. The grapevine epimenis is a day flyer, colorful. I discovered a new butterfly for Connecticut, but it's a day flying moth that pees on grapes. Did you ever see these? The Ailanthus weberum, these are also exploding. They feed on more than Ailanthus. They feed on a bunch of other plants. So they just look like they belong out in Howley. And there's a group called the Tiger moths that had these bright, contrasty colors. I'm going to skip this one. This was from Trinidad. And then there's this. These are the real crowd pleasers. So this is the Promethea moth, one of the wild silk moths, and this one. It's in the same family, the Luna moth. Does anyone see these? Yes, we see. So these were one of the big victims of when we released those little flies for the gypsy moths. They got out, but they're definitely coming back. They're just big. They're beautiful. They don't eat. They don't drink. The adults don't eat or drink. All their energy comes from the food that they ate as caterpillars. They sequester those nutrients into the adult butterfly, which is probably why they don't live that long. So they say, come out, and within the first day, they find a mate and lay eggs. And they got the rest of the week with nothing to do, which I kind of like. But they are truly ethereal creatures. And this is one. So I get quite a few of them in my yard that they like oaks and hickories. And I had 1,000 pictures because I feel like every time I see one, I have to take a picture. It's just one of those things. This is the scropium one. I haven't seen one of these in a while. They got nailed by a Landis parasitizing moths. This one is actually a half a foot. It's the largest moth in North America. Again, I haven't seen them in quite some time, but other people have been. Ever see these? These are a little more common. The Polybemus moth. It's named after the Cyclops. No. And there's actually 2 oddities underneath those upper wings. Maybe about 3.5, 4 inches wide. And big moths have big caterpillars. This is the Polyphemus moth right there. Use this. And I put this in here. Oh, this is the Promethea moth. So my wife and she's a potter, and she just retired last year, and she opened a pottery studio and named her Promethea Arcs, because pottery is basically earth and flames, and Prometheus brought flames to earth, so it seemed like a pretty good connection. And I told him I'd try to plug her pottery studio. So a lot of them, though, they don't want to be seen. They rest during the day, and they are definitely food for a lot of animals, and so they blend in with the background as aposematic coloration. And this is I can't think of the name right now. Doesn't matter. But do you see it? Do you see this one? The tulip tree beauty? Yeah. Wow. This is the pepper and salt geometer. So a lot of them are made to be hanging around on the hearth. This one, the white edge I think is a mimic of, the bracket fungus that you see. Yeah, I know, reminds me of that. This one, I think, evolved to blend it with 1970s basement panel. Common lytrosis. And there's a group called the prominence that when they're at rest, they're upside down and they sort of roll their legs in the two, so they look like a broken stick you could walk right by. And in that whole group, this is one I really love. Is the maple spambrum. It comes out when the leaves of the maples, they lay their eggs on maples, are kind of orange yellowy, kind of ragging looking, and kind of spotted mottled. So the moth looks just like that. So the orangey kind of beat up or ratty looking and model. I just think it's a great combination. Now the tiger moths, these are true. These are the ones that have those warning colors, the abysmatic coloration. Is that this is the Mayas, the Persian tiger moth, and a lot of them have that orange underneath the wings because they're poisonous to birds. There are things that can eat them, but the birds and mammals. So, in order to protect themselves, they advertise that they're inedible. It would do them no good if something ate them and that thing died and they die with it. So it's better that they just warn all the predators that they shouldn't be eating them. So in nature, those colors, those contrasty bright colors, those are even with plants and other animals, like frogs. Think of those, the poison frogs. Those are warning signs that they're toxic. This is the climb-eating moth. This is one of the tiger moths. And again, a lot of them are toxic. This is a day-flying one. Whenever I get an email from someone saying, "Oh, can you tell me what this moth is?" I already know before I open it that it's likely going to be this because people find it and they don't know quite what it is. They know it's not a fly or a wasp or a butterfly, so that they're curious. And but you can see it's got a little bit of orange on the head. But underneath, that's where the warning, like if it's fine, that orange is going to stick out. This is the pink-legged tiger moth. Doesn't look like there's much orange there. But if you look, there's got other legs. I guess that's enough. The agreeable tiger moth has got a little bit of orange underneath. The Virginia tiger moth, I'm lifting up the wings with a twig right there. You can see the orange there. That's not a moth. That's a frog. Again, pickerel frogs are toxic. You put a pickerel frog in with a peeper or something, that peeper's not going to feel too good. And so it has the orange there. And you notice he's lying on his back is perfectly fine. You put a frog on his back. Frogs have never been on their back before. They don't know what to do. So they just lie there. And I remember when I was a kid, I had these Ripley's Believe It or Not books. And there was this thing about, it had a frog like lifting barbells. And I've seen that in a few places. Someone actually made little barbells and they put it in their hands, but trying to get up as don't like this kind of go. So these are in my yard. This is another tiger moth, the delicate Cisnea, and it's got plenty of orange on it. They feed on gompe, which is growing here. I was told with the milkweeds, they love it. But what do you think a moth's biggest enemy is flying around at night, though? If they're resting during the day. Bats. So what they do, they make a sound to warn the bats that they're passing. I'd heard the sound. It was slowed down. It's this high pitch, almost like a Geiger counter. It's beyond our hearing. And the bat who don't hunt by sight, they hear that sound and then they avoid it. And there are moths out there that will mimic the sound of this toxic butterfly in order to fool the bat into not eating it. As a form of Bayesian mimicry where one non-toxic species benefits in looking for sounding like a toxic species. You all know this one. This is a tiger moth. Anyone know what this is called? This cat? That's the woolly bear. Yep. And that turns into the Isabella moth. Very few people actually see the adult moth, but I think most of us have come across the caterpillar. And it's got the orange underneath, like the tiger moth. And I think it's kind of neat that the legs patterns kind of echoes the caterpillar pattern. And there's the cousins of the tiger moths, the lichen moths also, a lot of them are not that tasty, so they advertise that as well as the painted lichen moth. So on the dog bane, I would be looking for these. These are the milkweed tussock moths. And they sometimes will just fill the whole, it's like this big fluffy grass. But the colors, it's the colors of the monarch butterfly that monarchs are toxic because they feed on plants in the milkweed family, or specifically milkweed. Whereas these will feed on milkweed, but they'll also eat the dog bane. And there's the caterpillar of the monarch showing that coloration, showing that they're poisonous. And the bird fly doesn't eat any. The milkweed has cardioglycosides, and if any mammal were to eat it, its heart would race and it would die of a heart attack. So they would spit it out before that happens. And the butterfly just maintains that color. Even though the butterfly just feeds on nectar, it maintains some of those toxins from the caterpillar stage. And monarchs have a whole different story. They live a lot longer than most of these creatures do. Most butterflies and moths only live a couple weeks. So this is the greater tiger moth, or the giant tiger moth. I think it's greater tiger moth. A great big creature. This doesn't have any of that coloration, but it does something else. Well, when I first saw it, I noticed it was injured. So that little droplet up there, I like pointer at the car. I did up, they got hurt. Something's going on. And then I saw another one, and it had two. It's doing that on purpose. It has these toxins in its body that sort of pushes out through the glands there. And look at the colors, that coloration, and supposedly it tastes really bitter. So any bird, the first time it would pick this up, first it would see that and then, it's maybe sick or dead, and it's going to stay away from it. But if it did, it would get that supposedly bitter taste. I know it's a bitter taste because I tried it once. I got a little piece of grass. I just have to begin. I got a little bit of droplet on there. Real taste. It wasn't too bad. It wasn't good either. And I didn't need to do it ever again. So, there is no creature on this planet that will earn my respect more, that evades being eaten by a bird by looking like something a bird already ate. So there's a whole bit of bird dropping mimics. And this is the pale red bird dropping mimic. These are pretty common. It just looks like a little dirt you might see hanging on a leaf, and the birds aren't interested in it. The scutters have a blema, another bird dropping mimic. Tufted birch dropping one, right on the nose there. White ribbon cartha, looks like kind of a washed out bird rock, and so does the large lace borer. Looks like a boulder bird rock, because that's their biggest enemy. Then there's this one. This is the beautiful woodbin. Their caterpillars feed on grapes and plants like Virginia creeper, also plants in that family. And so the adults have to go in there to lay eggs. So the birds were also feeding on these berries. They lay droppings. They drop leaf droppings that look kind of like the adult moth deer. So they not only evolved to look like a bird dropping, but a very specific bird dropping in the area where they frequent, which I think is kind of deep. And those really long, balloon kind of legs through kind of deep. All right, switching gears, the sphinx moths. So this is the blinded sphinx moth. This is a whole big group of sturdy, strong-flying moths. And when it's at rest, this is the blinded sphinx moth. When it opens up the wings, it has those great big eye spouts. And that's sort of like a starter. If something comes up to it, shows his big eyes, his predator-left eyes, and hopefully the predator will take off. So they call sphinx moths, they're also called hawk moths, because when the caterpillar rests, it sits up like the sphinx in Egypt. Its head is inside that cowl right there. So this is the Pandora sphinx. This is what it turns into. This is the Dawn sphinx. I mean, there were some really big ones there. And often they hover like hummingbirds and they'll feed on the way. That there's long proboscis as they sip flowers. You ever see these? Anyone grow tomatoes? You ever get these caterpillars? Back on more term. This is a stink spot. See those little things on its back? That was from a wasp. The wasp lays its eggs in the caterpillar, and it secretes its hormone to stop the caterpillar from developing. It wants to keep it a caterpillar so it could keep eating and beating these little wasps. And that they don't feed on any of the important parts inside that caterpillar. And then when it's time to leave, they eat those parts. The caterpillar guys, they chew their way out, they spin these cocoons, and they pop out. We find some more caterpillars. So the Tabaphahonians, a native species, we don't like them because they're feeding on our non-native tomatoes. We like our tomato. So someone told me, I was talking about this. She said, "Oh, you know what I do? She takes the caterpillars and she moves them over. She has some of the invasive, the nightshade, bittersweet nightshade. That's in that same tomato family, and they feed on that. Doesn't have to worry about her tomatoes, and if the boss finds them, they find. But instead of just killing them, she just kind of transfer or is it over to our actual invasive species? Oh, this is the fly that does that. This is the caterpillar, the Carolina spence, that they turn into. That very rarely do you see the adult of that caterpillar. They don't, and they also don't eat. They don't have working nanoparts. Parts. Do you ever see these? The hummingbird moth. This is hummingbird snakes. So very clear wings. So some of them fly during the day, and if you fly during the day, you want to look like anything but a moth. You look like a stinging insect or a hummingbird. And some of them look like wasps, because most birds will avoid stinging insects. Like this one. This is a moth. This is a Quadrupora. And they're big, and they sound like wasps, but they fly. They act like them. They can't do anything to get the moths. So a lot of the caterpillars, they also have to deal with not being eaten. And this is the morning glory crown. They feed it on the edges of leaves. They look like a chewed up leaf that's kind of partially dead. This ground-rooted pallet. So this, I don't know if this is toxic. It feeds on an aster. Aster isn't toxic. So there's something called Batesian mimicry that it might be doing there, where it gets a non-passive species look like it, but a passive species. And you ever see these hanging from your trees? This is these are geometers, inchworms. They basically just, when they disperse, the caterpillar hangs down from a thread, and they're at the mercy of the wind. A lot of them have very specific host plants, so they're waiting for a breeze to carry it in the right direction. No. Which is kind of risky. I mean, what if it blows up to the wrong plant? Plus, it's hanging there. There's dragonflies flying around. If it lands on the ground, there's ants and beetles stuff to eat it, and yet it must work because there's plenty of these kind of moths out there. And then there's the slug caterpillar moths. They don't have legs like most caterpillars. Instead, they have like these little stubs, and they're underneath the leaves, and they feed underneath, and they're just sort of glommed on there. And this one feeds along the edge, so it kind of matches the edge contour of the leaf. And those little spikes there, they would hurt like you wouldn't believe if you were to touch one. They had stinging spikes, like this one. So ever see these? Saddleback? You don't want to put that in. So what happens is the spike will break off in your skin, and it stings like a wasp. I was talking to someone who got stung by one, and he said it just went for like 2 days. It got really like burning pain, and then it turned into really severe itchy, and then a little bit of pain again. And it's not like it sees you across the yard, it's going to chase you down to poke you. It's sort of like a passive thing. You might have somebody brush your hand against it. I think they're cool looking. This is their pupa. It looks kind of creepy in and of itself. And the adult, even more so. But this is another one of the slug caterpillar moths, the small parasa. I love it. There's so little green fur. It's nature. Someone says sloth lips, but that's sort of cheating. But I love these. And this is the frontal moth. It's not a slug caterpillar moth. It's in a different family, but it's the same thing. They kind of remind me that Tribble is from Star Trek. But you just want to nice pretty moth, but you would be howling big if you pet them, because there's spice. Again, you spice underneath that fur. It's not true fur. It's actually modified scales that kind of resemble fur. Only mammoths have fur. But again, it's not like it's going to go after you. They're just there, eating, minding their own business, hoping nobody touches. This is in my yard. I've wanted to see this for so many years. This is a monkey slug, multiple hagwalk. And I've seen pictures of them. And I just thought it's supposed to look like a shed tarantula skin. And I guess that keeps other things away from it. And everyone always said these are like very severely stinging caterpillars. And I was reading a book called Eastern Caterpillars by David Wagner. He's a lepidopterist. And he wrote this excellent book on caterpillars of North America. And he said, even though everywhere you read it says that they sting They don't. He said he actually tried her, and he said he doesn't get stung by them. He said it's a matter of just misinformation being spread from one person to another, getting in print, and then someone sees it in print, and they copy that, and it's just not true. So I read this, and I had my first one 84 years ago on my red book, and I said, okay, Gator, I trust you. I'm going to try this. So I took my finger, and I had it. It was on a stick, and on a leak. I figured this would probably be the frog that would hurt the least. Like the back of my finger here, I just touched it for a second, and nothing. Then I got a little more bold. I just held it, and nothing. And then I kind of went, no, they don't step. So, good news for me. I don't know if that's as good news for them, but just an example of how misinformation can spread. Failure moths are the cities on their house. So the male is there, the female is spiteless. She spends her whole life inside that little structure that they make out of sticks. And some species are bigger, some are smaller. These are pretty common on my house. And what happens is the male finds the female, they breed, she lays eggs, she has her structure in there, she lives in there, she lays her eggs inside there, and then she dies. The young hatch, they eat mom, and then they eat the sticks. So they basically eat mom, house and hole, and then they go dig their own little nests. Nobody was going to eat just the acacia moth, big fuzzy things. That's when a lot of caterpillars are really fuzzy because it'd be a little discouraging to try to swallow for a bird mostly. And this is a lappet moth, and I saw this in Rhode Island. I was at a friend's house. I walked up to him and did this, and I stepped back, and they go, "What's it going to do to me? Why do they step back?" It's a look at it. That little threatening posture was enough to get a big human to step back. So maybe it would work for something else because there's really nothing I to do. Yeah, it looks sort of spidery over there or something. I don't know. All right, I know one moth joke. I know two moth jokes. I could only tell one. It makes company. So a moth goes to a podiatrist's office. It says, "Doctor, things aren't going well for me. My kids, they don't respect me. My wife has lost interest in me. I get no happiness in my job, no satisfaction. I wake up, I just want to stay in bed all day. I'm just miserable. Can you help me?" And the podiatrist says, "I'm sorry to hear that, but I'm a podiatrist. I fix feet. You're looking for a psychiatrist. Why would you come to my office?" And moth says, "A light was on." So, moths are attracted to lights. And there are a few theories there, but it's not so much that they're attracted to lights, they are trapped by lights. They're not used to bright lights. They didn't evolve with bright lights, neither did we. And they don't see a light, say, "I'm gonna go hang around that light all day because it's awesome." What they're doing is it's usually the males that get trapped because they're flying around looking for females, and it's a sensory overload. And if you've ever seen them flying around in circles, they're trying to break away. And some of them can, but some of them can't. And they usually end up staying around the light and they're trapped. And then daytime puffs and they're still there. And then the next night, if the light is still on, they're still there. And that's the power of lights being on 24 hours a day, every day. It just completely disrupts their lives. So laboratories and entomologists had used this to advantage to sample what moths and other insects we have in the area, night-flying insects. When I first started, I wanted to do this to see what I had in my yard, and I was driven by that rosy maple moth, that orange and that pink and yellow one I showed you earlier on. That I went to the library to look up. I learned that you can make traps to see them. So I got this big can here, cut a hole in it, made a little funnel. I hung it under just a bowl. And on that bowl, I straightened out some coat hangers that were right over the funnel. So the moths come to the light, they fly around, their wings hit the little wires, and they fall into that funnel. and you look, and I would look inside it, but A. Martin's in there in the morning to give them somewhere to land. It was kind of neat. Found things that they didn't know I had in my yard. And then around June, the beetles really started coming out, and it just kind of spoiled the fun. So I tried something else, and this is what I used then, a black one. So obviously something's going on here because all of these things are on the sheet. And what I do is I take a black light, you get in the top chassis there, and you disconnect the electrifying grid, and the actual light still works, but it doesn't electrify. All of these bugs, see, there's a Luna moth to get a better picture, would be lying on the ground dead if I hadn't de-electrified that. So this is what happens. And it's not just moths. There's beetles in there. There's hymenoptera. There's all kinds of insects there. Hundreds of. This is just one night. This is what you lose when you have these kind of lights. And people hear that bzz, bzz, and they think it's mosquitoes. There's not a single mosquito on that sheet. Mosquitoes are attracted to our breath and our body heat. They're not attracted for lights. So these things don't work at all. So people get bored, I guess, when they sell them at a tag sale. My wife picks them up $3 and I use them for this. So when I run these lights, I usually only do it once a week now, and I make sure I turn it off before I go to bed. If I were to leave this on all night, I've set the table for all the birds in the neighborhood. So and the frogs and the bull-faced hornets and the paper and the yellow jackets will all come. I once went out and I saw a Luna moth wings lying on the ground from a PB that it down. So I don't do that thing. But this is just to give you an idea of the damage that these things can do. So what I do, this is another kind of lighter mercury vapor that also works for bringing them in. Same kind of thing. So I go out with a cassette, empty cassette case. I have to explain to kids what this is. I clip them up. So it sort of holds them in there, and I can hold them next to pictures of themselves to kind of figure out what I'm looking at, and then I let them go. Sometimes I'll put it in the fridge, cool them off a little, take some pictures, and then let them go. So it really works really well. And so I like to sample. I like to know what's in my yard, and that's really the best way to go about doing it. These are some of the books that I use to ID them. The New Peterson guys are good. That's the Caterpillars book that Dave Wamner wrote. We talked about touching that monkey slot. Another way that's beneficial for everyone, you paint the trees. You get a mixture of beer or brown sugar. I don't know, whatever you have in your cabinet, you're not going to drink that's really sweet, like peach schnapps, something like that. You mix it in, and that alcohol, that fermented alcohol, sort of it wafts in the air. It carries the smell that it's almost sickeningly sweet into the surrounding area. And in come the moths, and they'll just sip away at the stuff that you painted on the trees. So I always say, you don't have a beer for me, a beer for the moths. So we just sit and enjoy each other's company. Oh, yeah, this is even better. I forgot about this. We had a watermelon on our counter that really started to stink. I've never had a watermelon go bad in our house. When it does, it smells like cheap wine. I said, well, we're not eating this. I wonder. So it's got the fermentation going. It's got the sweetness. I went out, I smashed some trees. And what's good about it is it sort of sticks in there. It is excellent. It's the best way to get them. And again, you're giving them something. You're not disturbing their night. And then you're just wishing them good luck. So happy National Moth Week. It just started. It's just started today, and it goes through the week. It started in 2002, I think, and there are now 90 countries involved. And what happens is people all over the world set up their lights. They have parties. Nature centers. They're doing 25th here. They're doing a moth night. Friday. Yep. And you just share what you saw on the internet and whatever, and it's great. And it's amazing how this took off. There's enough people actually interested in this. So I'm going to wrap this up with the catocala, the underwings. They kind of look like a piece of bark when they're at rest on the side of a tree. But if you look under the wings, there's a little surprise. And it's believed that the that coloration on the hind wings. If one gets spooked and it's flying in the air, let's say a blue jay sees it flying, it sees a flash of orange, flash of orange, flash of orange, flash of orange, and it has a search pattern for that orange. The moth lands, closes its wings, and leaves the blue jay still looking for that orange. So it's kind of neat. What I think is interesting is the names, and I think a lot of people also get a kick out of it. So it's called the old wife. I didn't name it. Then you have the little bride, the darling, there's the sweetheart, the girlfriend, the betrothed. They have these romanticized names, and these were named usually in the mid to late 1800s. Someone wrote a book on Legions of the Night about this group of moths, and he wrote a chapter called the Catocala Wars. There was a big race in the 19th century to be the first to name these insects. And they went sort of an unconventional way where they sort of have these romanticized names. And I love that. I look at these and I have a little bit of a connection to the humans and these animals. And I think of these entomologists out in the woods all by themselves with their, I don't know, the gas lamp or whatever, or the candles. And they're missing their brides and their darlings and their sweethearts and their girlfriends. And that sort of showed up in these bugs. And it went another direction too. There's a group of these underwings that have dark hind wings. So you have the gloomy underwing, the forsaken, the dejected, the tearful, the penitent underwing, the once married underwing. That's a little too specific. I want to know more about that. The mourning underwing, and my favorite, the inconsolable underwing. I've never seen the inconsolable underwing. I don't know if I want to. I don't need the drama. But again, it's that human connection, that the thoughts that went into it, and that's kind of we're humans. It kind of brings that connection to this group of creatures. I don't collect insects. I don't have a problem with people who do, but I personally don't. I use photographs, and these are all the underwings that showed up in my yard over the years. I just found 2 new ones in the last 2 years, so they're still coming. It's kind of fun. And there's a moth named after me. It's another story. So these are harmless creatures. And they don't bite. They don't sting. There's really nothing. They pollinate our plants. The caterpillars don't pick up the fuzzy ones. If you don't know what they are, maybe you'll get a sting. So don't pick up the fuzzy caterpillar. The adult moths are harmless. I mean, they'll sit on you. They don't know you're dangerous. My granddaughters come over, and they always leave walking with moths all over their body. And there's always a smile, and sometimes it's an uncomfortable smile, but it's a smile nonetheless. So we'll end it there. And I just wanted to give you an idea of the things, because this is being sponsored by the Dark Sky. I think I said Dark Night, Dark Sky. Pardon? Committee. I was going to say group. And these are some of the things we would lose if we don't deal with that, because we can't. We don't want it disrupts their entire life cycle. And there's so much out there. There are thousands of these creatures out there, and they pollinate out. And this is just the moths. There's hundreds and hundreds of different beetles in the air. Same thing, major pollinators, we need them, and they're affected by the life. Their whole life cycle is interrupted by these day after night after night after night after night of running lights. They're not evolved to deal with that. So I just wanted to give you maybe something to care a little bit more about, and maybe spread the word. So we'll end it right there.
Thank you.